Hello there, brother.
For your spiritual liberation depends on release from ego consciousness.
You look so gay.
Good morning, everyone. For those of you that are regulars here, you may notice that some of the regulars are missing. And that's because in our neighboring community down at Portland, the spiritual directors of Ananda, Jyotish and Devi, are visiting, and many people from here have gone down there to be part of that event. So today's topic is, what should we aspire to be? What is our goals? And how do we know that it's right for us? There are many ways that we go about in goal setting. Sometimes we think that, well, we should do what we are good at. And sometimes we go the opposite way and we think we should do what is good for us. And then sometimes we say, well, we should do what is good for other people. And we kind of go, and then underlying all of this is the thought that whatever I do, I should do it. I should be the best I can be. So there are all of these themes that go through goal setting or aspiration. And it's good to turn it around and think of it slightly differently and speak a little bit about motivation. And there was a father and a son were having a conversation. The son was very young, around 7 years old. And the father was asking, son, what do you want to do when you grow up? And the boy, and he said, the father was asking, do you want to be an astronaut? Or do you want to be a scientist? Do you, what do you want to do? And the boy said, no, Daddy, I don't want to be any of that. It's all boring. I want to be a garbage collector. So father was a little disappointed to begin with. Then he gathered himself and he was thinking, the garbage collector comes once a week and he drives this great big truck which makes a big noise, and there is a forklift-like thing that comes out of it and lifts things. So obviously my boy wants to work with big machines. So trying to change his mind, the father says, if you become an astronaut, you can actually drive a rocket ship. And maybe you can drive a big truck on Mars or Moon. Wouldn't you like that? And the son says, Daddy, no. I want to be a garbage collector because he only works 1 day a week. Then I get 6 more days to play. Motivation behind our aspirations is very important. So we can't really want something simply because of its ability to make us stop working very quickly. That's the wrong motivation for us to aspire. But this is true even in the higher aspects. Say we want to dedicate our lives to service. And again, there are several ways that one can do it. There was, in the recent opioid crisis, the terrible tragedy that afflicted major parts of our country. At the center of this was a pharmaceutical company called Purdue Pharma. And the owners of that company, a family called the Sacklers, and they were indicted for for their role in precipitating this crisis. And that's not my point today, but they knew what they were doing was primarily money motivated, but they became big patrons of the art. Oh, you could, until recently, go around in the great museums of New York or in Paris or art programs in major universities, and you could see the name of the Sackler family that had endowed it. And they had a lot of cachet in society, and they were perceived as great patrons of the art and that they served the community. This is one reason why one might aspire to serve, and obviously, it's very obvious that's the wrong reason. But even when we serve, saying, I am going to help someone else, that's a bit of a slippery slope there as well, because it is, after all, whether we come up and serve somebody or not, God is going to make sure that they get what is due to them. We might be the instrument for that particular action of God, But that's all we are, and if we are not there, somebody else will come and do it. Then it's our motivation for service is not that I help make a difference in the world. And in fact, you can see many people speak about it that way, that I help make a difference in the world. And they might even say, when I grow up, I want to make a difference in the world. But it's more that we serve because it purifies us. The person that's being served, their needs are going to be met regardless, that we serve because they are going to be purified. So again, motivations are important because there's a very interesting way in which the universe works. In the ancient scriptures of India, it is said that the universe is a kalpa vriksha. Vriksha means tree. It's a Sanskrit term. Kalpa means time. The universe is the tree of time. What does a tree do? The tree bears fruit, of course. So the universe it's a wish-fulfilling tree. That's where it's leading towards. Over time, the mechanics of the universe and as it relates to my consciousness and your consciousness, it's arranged in such an exquisite way that if I wanted something, if I aspire to something, I will get it. In his book, Once and Future Christ, Hriman, who along with Padma, for those of you that don't know who he is, they are the spiritual directors of our work here. And he wrote this wonderful book called Once and Future Christ. And in that book, he makes an interesting statement. He says that when we want something, when we aspire to something, that thought, the very thought, comes with it with a package of energy that is going to materialize the reality behind that thought. This is how the human consciousness has that power. By merely wanting it, we are given the energy to manifest it. Now, we have to use our free will and make sure that it happens and all of that. And if I want something now and I want something else 2 seconds later, then I get this energy, it goes away. Then 2 seconds later, I get something else, that goes away. 20 years later, nothing's happened. But if we focus on it, if we put out the energy, we will get it. And now at this point, you might be quite suspicious of what I just said, and therefore by implication, whatever I said before and whatever I'm about to say next. So let me allay those suspicions by introducing 2 caveats into this. Whatever we want, we will get, but it may not be right away. It may be 10 years later, 20 years later, 2 lifetimes later. And the reasons for that are multiple. There is no malice behind this. It's just, if we want something, then we need to be ready to receive it, and it takes a while for our karma to realign itself to that new goal. You kind of are making a U-turn on the freeway, so you need to brake and then turn around. So that there might not be enough time in this lifetime for it to happen. So next time you come in, you'll have a sudden interest. They say, oh, I want to be a garbage collector, or not that one, but something else. I want to be a painter, and that's because perhaps wanted it in a previous lifetime, put some work, and then now you're ready to take it forward. So that's one caveat. The second caveat, which is even more important, is this. You also get its opposite. Not just what you wanted, but you also get the opposite of it. It's again a very extraordinary notion in the Indian scriptures and in the Bible too. When you look at it, when you look beyond the words, the same notion is contained in there, that we, you, me, this chair, and everything else in the, I don't know why I said chair, so many other things in the universe, all the planets, all the galaxies, everything else is but a thought of God. And it said, God, whose nature is Satchidanandam, ever existing, ever new bliss, wanted to enjoy itself through multiple outlets. So God, it is said, had the desireless desire to create. And this creation, how can God's thought become something that I can touch and make a noise from? This is very, very solid. Swami Kriyananda gives a very, very good metaphor here. He says that when a fan begins to rotate, it creates an impression of solidity merely because of the fact that it's moving. You see, when stillness turns into movement, solidity, materialness is what results. In other words, matter is but movement, matter is but vibration. There is in the Bhagavad Gita, most of you know, it's a conversation between God and his devotee, or between a guru and his disciple. And the God here is represented in the form of Krishna, and the disciple in the form of Arjuna. And they are in a battlefield about to go to war, and Arjuna doesn't want to fight anymore. And Krishna says, no, you gotta fight, and here's the reason why. And it has 18 chapters, and in chapter 8, which is among the most mysterious of all chapters, and indeed in much of the scripture, whatever little I have read, it's very, very mysterious. And here is what it says about what I just said. And I'll read you the Sanskrit, and know that the way these scriptures have been preserved, these are almost certainly the exact words that Krishna spoke all those maybe 2,800 years ago. So it says, Aksharam Brahmam Paramam Swabhavo Adhyatma Uchyate Bhuta Bhavod Bhavakaro Visargaha Karma Sangjitaha. Aksharam Brahmam Paramam Swabhavo Adhyatma Uchyate Bhuta Bhavod Bhavakaro Visargaha Karma Sangjitaha. And so what it says is, the immutable spirit, the immutable expansive spirit, meaning the immutable ever-existing joy, when it becomes individualized in the universe, within you and within me and within this chair and within every atom of the universe, Swabhavo Adhyatma Uchyate, it is known as Kutastha Chaitanya, the Christ consciousness. We have within ourselves the reflection of that vibrationless spirit whose sole purpose is to manifest its joy through us. And then it says, the second part is what's really mysterious, Bhuta Bhavod Bhavakaro Visargaha Karma Sangjitaha. The word there is Visarga. I'll tell you the individual meaning and then I'll put the whole thing together. Visarga is a name given to a particular type of syllable in Sanskrit. The syllable is aha. You know, the sound that we make, aha, that's called Visarga. Stay with me, I'll tie all of this to duality in a moment. The uninterrupted, most primitive sound that any organism with vocal cords can make is the sound of ah, ah. So ah is our expression of God. That's why in the syllable Om, it starts with a little bit of ah right in the beginning. Then when that infinite, uninterrupted sound gets cut, aha, then there is a before and there is an after. You see what I'm saying? There is an up and there is a down. That is called as Visarga. So it says, Bhuta Bhavod Bhavakaro Visargaha, means all beings and their consciousness of duality is created, and their consciousness is created by this aha, by this duality. So, and this is known as karma. Bhuta Bhavod Bhavakaro Visargaha Karma Sangjitaha. The wise people who know say that this propensity that we have is to cut off the consciousness of God is known as karma. Isn't that interesting? The infinite expansive principle had the desireless desire to create and therefore put a portion of its vibrationless consciousness at the point between the eyebrows, and forgetting that true nature, the cause of everything around us, which is but a thought of God, is Visarga, our ability, our inbuilt ability to cut off ourselves from the thought that we are divine. So this is just one of the 32 verses that are in this very mysterious chapter. I really encourage you to read it. But where I'm going with this is, the universe is a wish-fulfilling tree. We get exactly what we want, but it's a package deal. It comes with it the exact opposite. If we want to get drunk on Friday night, we do get the buzz or whatever it is that we get out of imbibing alcohol, but we also get hungover Saturday morning. Bhuta bhavodbhavakaro visarga karma sanjitaha. The wise call this separate, this duality as karma. And this might come at some point later. Now, this is kind of the structure of the universe. Now, if we apply it to where we are right this moment, and isn't that interesting that every talent we have, every limitation that we have, every fear that we have, every lust, motivation, desire, attachment, everything that we have is a result of something that we had aspired to before, either earlier this life or in a previous lifetime, or it's dual, waiting. That's why aspiration is important. You really got to go beyond wanting to be a garbage collector. It's not what we do, but it's why we do it. Because what happens if we are here as a result of past aspirations, then you say, oh, you know what, I really wanted to make a lot of money from the past 5 lifetimes, and then so now I have the opportunity to make money, but oh, I forgot the fact that I need to be healthy to enjoy that money. So therefore, this entire lifetime, I'll be a rich man who is unhealthy, aspiring to be very healthy, so I do headstands every day and eat blueberries and vitamin D and so on. And then there isn't enough time in this lifetime, so I die fairly quickly and come back next time. I'll be a rich and relatively healthy man, and I realize something else. And we keep tinkering with life, lifetime after lifetime. So Adi Shankara is a very great saint from about 1200 years ago. He said, Punarapi jananam, punarapi maranam, punarapi janani jathare shayanam iha samsare bahudustare krupaya pare pahi murare. Says, you're born again, you'll die again. And then once again, you go to sleep in the womb of your mother. And this way, samsara, the cycle of birth and life, keeps continuing. Do you not realize that this is so hard? So please, for God's sake, ask for the grace of God. That's a kind of a rough and tumble translation of something that's significantly more transcendental, but you get the idea. So then our aspiration should be focused on how do we overcome the pull of this negative karma that we have brought, all of us have brought here. And the second one is, how do we transcend it? Since we start about how do I overcome the pull of this negative limiting karma, then how about this as a starting point? Starting with our limitations rather than as our strengths and making them the center of our aspiration. So often I get asked, people come and tell me that, oh, I just cannot practice yoga because I'm so tight. And my answer always is, well, if you were not tight, you wouldn't have any need to practice yoga. Precisely because of the fact that you're tight is why you need to practice yoga. In other words, limitations are the careful hand of God extended out in infinite compassion to say, my child, this is where you need to go. That's the beauty of limitations. Swami Kriyananda wrote a book called Living Wisely, Living Well. And it's a quote every day for all days of the year. And today's quote, the end of it was, be grateful even for your limitations, because with that gratitude comes abundance. Isn't that so? Just think about that for a moment. In my own life, I had a very, very small demonstration of this fact. I was deathly afraid of public speaking. This was my thing. I was so afraid that even in grade school, when I was asked to answer a question in my classroom, I would stand up and I would stutter because I was so afraid. of what all the people were thinking. And this was well known even to my teachers, and I actually got a scholarship for having this kind of disability. But in the heart of my hearts, I always knew that I was only afraid. I really didn't have a stutter, as you can all tell. And then I came over to, so I had decided that I will become a scientist. Because in my teenage view of the world, a scientist would sit in a closed room with a piece of pen and with a piece of paper and a pen and spend all of his life thinking great thoughts. And every now and then, without ever having to speak, write it down and get fame and fortune as a result of it. Fame, at least, scientists made a fortune. So I had literally planned my life this way, aware of my limitation. And then God, of course, extended his hand in compassion in totally unacceptable ways, according to me at least. So I came over. If you wanted to do PhD back then in India, America was the place to be. So I said, I'll come to the US, I'll do my PhD. And after I did my master's, then for various reasons, I had to postpone my PhD and take up a job. So I came over here to Microsoft. And almost from day one, somehow it worked out that I had to speak publicly. Okay, from day one, this just happened. And I couldn't quit the job also, because there is a 3 to 5 year period where you have to get your green card, and if not, you really can no longer stay here. And I wanted to stay here. I wanted to do my PhD. So I was captive audience, and I had to do this. It was a matter of survival. I still remember my first public talk that I had to give. It was for 350 people in the Westin Towers in downtown Seattle. It's those big, round, fancy-looking buildings. It was their main ballroom, and there were 350 people there, and I did not sleep the entire previous night. This was my greatest nightmare coming true. And, well, there's really no climax to this story. I'll just say that I gave a competent talk, and then I gave another one, then I gave another one, and there were 100 talks. Later, I was still afraid, I was still unhappy, I still found the whole thing very inconvenient and onerous, but I did realize something. My fear of public speaking had absolutely nothing to do with my inability to communicate. It had everything to do with my ego. What if I did something bad and people found out about it? Okay? But then later on, once I came onto the spiritual path, I realized something significantly more profound. This is the compassionate hand of God. That because I'm so impractical in whatever I do, my way of growing in these teachings is by speaking these truths in front of other people, by sharing them, I actually make it relevant and practical to myself. You see, so the only way I could grow to lessen the burden of my karma was to make the effort to share it in front of other people. But to do that, I had to start with my greatest limitation. And all of this happened, I deserve no credit for this, because left to myself, I wouldn't have done it. You see, that's why the hand of God is so compassionate that it almost gets to your heart when you sit and think about how exquisitely our limitations are placed in front of us. How exquisitely, the greatest limitation, just a little tap on that drywall, and then you poke a hole, and then you're on the other side and into greater freedom. So how high should we aspire? Well, start with your limitations. Look deeply, look at it straight in the eye, and see what's trying to happen. Almost invariably, we'll find something very big there, because the name of the game is ego transcendence. And Swami Kriyananda said that the ego is simply a bundle of self-definitions. So that's where the limitations come in, especially our self-definitions, more in terms of what I cannot do, is what frees us. They contain the seed of our emancipation right there. Now, this is good. Say you do this. things never end like this on the spiritual path. There is always one more thing. The one more thing is this. You kind of begin to do this and say, especially on the path of Kriya Yoga, as you begin to serve and as you begin to do these inner practices, lessening the edge, softening, chamfering the edge of karma within yourself, little by little, things like kindness and compassion and honesty and so on, they become a little easier because those things that pull us away from it have lost some of their edge. They become a little bit easier. And then it's not that hard. Even after a few years, we begin to get to a stage where we look back at what we were and we realize the amount of progress we've made. And it's a good feeling. And that's what's bad about it. We begin to say, I am honest. I am so spiritual. And Swami Kriyananda said that once he realized that he needed to work on his humility, and for 6 months, bringing the enormous willpower that he was capable of, for 6 months he worked on his humility, and one day he woke up and realized how much pride he took in being so humble. This is a new self-definition. And it'll have its consequences either in this lifetime or later on we come into it, and then we see so many of these fallen preachers and fallen saints, and then you just have to wonder. But this is why the highest aspiration, really, once you look at your limitations and see the ways in which that they can make us free, the highest aspiration really is to diminish self-focus. Swami Kriyananda has written it's really a marvelous book. Oh, good heavens. What is it? Renunciate Order for a New Way. No, Sadhu Beware. Sadhu Beware. He gives there 32 different things that one can do to reduce self-focus. But right in the beginning, he says the following. The first duty of every soul is to release the hold that ego consciousness has on it. All spiritual practices are subservient to this one supreme obligation. Okay, so our aspiration is only that whatever we aspire to will focus us on the divine, will anchor us in the divine, as Sri Yukteswar puts it. That's the definition of spiritual effort as opposed to material effort. They might look the same on the outside, but the spiritual effort anchors us in the divine. So it's very possible to come into a spiritual class and that our effort be material. And it's very possible to be in a highly material situation and the effort is completely spiritual. Paramahansa Yogananda, whose teachings we follow here, his guru was Sri Yukteswar. That's the bearded gentleman right here. And then you go from there, you come to Jesus Christ, and the one next to that is Babaji, and the one after that is Lahiri Mahashaya. He's Yogananda's guru's guru. It's a very beautiful incident in his life. Lahiri Mahashaya, he retired from the Indian Railways, and after he retired, his level of spiritual attainment was so great that he never needed sleep. That for decades, he just sat in full lotus position on a small raised wooden platform in the middle of his, what in the US we'd call it a living room, and in India they'd call it a parlor, Parlor. So he'd sit there, and then his disciples would gather around, and sometimes they would just sit in front of him for an entire day. And even if you look at this photo, there is that smile that he has, that it's there, it's not there, but then when you look at it, you know it's speaking to you. And imagine sitting in front of him like this. And then he had a disciple named Ramu, and Ramu was blind. He was blind since his birth. And Ramu's job was to stand behind Lahiri Mahashaya and then wave a fan to keep his master from not feeling the burden of the Indian heat. Then you can imagine Ramu standing behind him with white, sightless eyes and day after day fanning his master. And then one day, perhaps it was the will of God that his blindness karma was about to be over. And then, prompted by other disciples, Ramu, after a satsang with Lahiri Mahashai, when everybody else has left, the blind Ramu he knows his way around, so he walks in that way, in the careful way that such people do, and comes in front of Lahiri Mahashai and looking at him. And I'm going to read these direct words. Ramu asks Lahiri Mahashai, he says, Master, the illuminator of the cosmos is within you. I pray that you bring his light into my eyes, that I perceive the sun's lesser glow. Now, Lahiri Mahashai, was fully God realized, he looks at him with that smile, expanding just a little bit, and he says, Ramu, someone has connived to put me in a difficult position. I have no healing power. Now, Ramu, who was very smart, he said, Sir, but the infinite one within you can certainly heal. And then Lahiri Mahashai says, that is indeed different, Ramu. God's limit is nowhere. He who ignites the stars and the cells of the flesh with the mysterious life effulgence can surely bring luster of vision into your eyes. And then he reaches forward and touches Ramu's forehead. And then he says, chant, there's an ancient chant called Shri Ram Jai Ram. He says, chant the name of Rama. Shri Rama is the name of an ancient avatar. So Shri Ram Jai Ram is victory be to Rama, victory be to the hallowed name. He says, chant that for 7 days and 7 nights. And then he says, the splendor of the sun shall have a special dawn for you. And then 7 days later, when Ramu walks into this parlor of Lahiri Mahashai, who all through the 7 days, of course, sat completely absorbed in God, never going to sleep, in full lotus, Ramu walks in, and then for the first time, he beholds the supernal form of his master. He sees the outward sun for the first time in his life. But the key there is, I have no healing power, Lahiri Mahashaya said. And then he said, but then God can heal you. This is what self-forgetfulness looks like. And in the end, our aspiration, we start with the limitations, and then we work with the deeper spiritual ego, and on and on. It's many lifetimes worth of work for you and me and for everybody. But the anchoring in the divine is our highest aspiration, to see behind everything we do the hand of God. So I leave you with this final quote on self-forgetfulness from this extraordinary book of Swami Kriyananda, Sadhu Beware. He says, listen to this carefully, there's a lot of power in this. Don't let your mind play with the thought of where and how you fit into any picture. Don't toy with flattery by entertaining it even lightly in your mind. Reject sternly any thought of self-importance, self-praise, self-justification, or blame. This subject is as important for you as your own salvation, for your spiritual liberation depends on release from ego consciousness. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Amen.
Listen, whispering within your soul.